Hello, I'm Harnaik Dhami, and I will be discussing our group's work on using a UAV-mounted 3D LiDAR to estimate plant height. Newer robotic technologies can be used to automate dull tasks that are performed by farmers, such as harvesting, mowing, and sorting. They can also improve the efficiency with data collection in areas such as precision grazing or optimizing phenotyping to help improve traits. For our project, we wanted to help in the area of crop height estimation. One of the best indicators of crop health is growth patterns. Accurately measuring the heights of plants can be a manually intensive task. Using robots allows a more accurate and complete data set to be recorded. We specifically looked at row-based crops that are used for phenotyping and that were structurally aligned within plots. We also performed detection of the plots within a farm. Our work has two main contributions. First, we developed a suite of point cloud tools to process farm data. Our data was collected from a wheat farm, and we have made these datasets publicly available. Second, we created a toolchain to generate virtual plot-based farms with a parameter-controlled varying ground terrain to help with simulation studies. Here, we highlight the comparison between our work and previous work. Unlike previous work, we used a 3D LiDAR mounted on a hexacopter unmanned aerial vehicle. Previous work with 3D LiDAR had it mounted on a ground vehicle. We also performed 3D map generation and ground plane estimation. Lastly, we provided results from simulations as well. Our unmanned aerial vehicle frame was the DJI M600 Pro. The UAV comes with 3 GPS antennas that help increase the location accuracy compared to using just a single antenna commonly found on most other systems. Our onboard computer for data collection was an NVIDIA Jetson TX2. We also mounted a Velodyne VLP-16 3D LiDAR under the frame of the UAV. The 3D LiDAR consists of 16 LiDAR channels and can refresh at a rate between 5 to 20 Hz. It has a range of 100 meters with an accuracy of plus or minus 3 centimeters. While it costs more, we chose a 3D LiDAR over 2D LiDAR due to the increase in the amount of data received. This is beneficial due to the limited flight time of UAVs. Here, we highlight the block diagram of our algorithm. Each step will be discussed in more detail. However, here is a quick overview. The algorithm can be broken into 3 main stages: map creation, plot detection, and height estimation. We expect the UAV's location information and 3D LiDAR scans as input. Using these, we transform all of the LiDAR's points from a reference of the LiDAR to a reference of the world. Next, successive LiDAR scans are stitched together to create the world map. We then remove any unnecessary data, such as points that are outside of the farm. The next portion focuses on plot detection. Using our filtered point cloud map, we cluster the points using a k-means clustering algorithm. Then, using a voting scheme, we find the best fit dimensions for a bounding box that corresponds to a plot's length, width, and orientation. Using these, the plot grid is determined. Lastly, the height is estimated by using the ground points around a plot to determine a ground plane. The heights of all the other points within a plot are found relative to the ground plane to get the height estimation. Here we show the map building. On the left is an overhead video of the drone flight over a wheat field. The video on the right shows the open loop map building. Using the 3D LiDAR scans and drone location, the LiDAR point clouds are stitched into a map of the farm. More and more of the map is built as the UAV moves throughout the farm. One of the data processing steps we did was to use a voxel filter. A voxel filter discretizes the point cloud map into a 3D grid composed of 3D pixels, i.e. voxels. It averages all of the points within the voxel into one point. This was done for a few reasons. Firstly, raw data can be noisy due to fast UAV movement or wind pushing the UAV, causing a lag between where the UAV says it is and where it actually is. Using a voxel filter helps account for some of this noise. Secondly, voxel filtering helps with processing due to the downsampling. It reduced our map from 44 million points to 700,000, and a file size of 1.2 gigabytes down to only 22 megabytes. It should be noted that we still use the raw data to improve the accuracy of height estimations. This is discussed in a further step. We used a few other processing tools as well. Specifically, we used a crop box tool to eliminate points within the map that were not a part of the farm. As shown in the image here, the map was cut down to just the plots and ground rows. We also used a recentering tool that shifts the points to be centered to the origin of the new point cloud map. This is not necessary, but helps with visualization. Another measure to improve the accuracy of height estimation was to detect the plots. The way the height estimation works is we find an estimate for the ground plane and use that to find the height of points within the point cloud. With increasing variation of the ground and size of the farm, this can get inaccurate. To combat this, we determine the plots and find a local ground plane relative to the plots. Currently, our process is not completely automated. We need to initially know the number of plots and expect the plots to be in an ordered grid. We do not expect to know the size of the plots or how far apart they are. Currently, there are road detection tools that have been developed for RGB cameras, but not for LiDAR. The video on the right shows one of these techniques developed by Lee et al. For our work, we focused on plot detection with 3D LiDAR as opposed to road detection with an RGB camera. The first step of the plot detection stage is to cluster the points within the point cloud map. We start by removing all points below a set Z value to filter out the ground. This leaves all the points within the plot. We feed these into a k-means clustering algorithm along with the manually determined number of plots. Using the clusters, we determine each of their bounding boxes. These are shown in the image below. As can be seen, some are not aligned with the plot at all, but a good portion of them are. We use this knowledge in the next step. Using the bounding boxes from the previous step, a voting scheme was implemented to fix the bounding boxes and find the best fitting parameters for length, width, and orientation. Each of these three parameters were quantized into ranges. The vote for a range would increase by 1 each time one of the initial bounding boxes parameters fell into the range. At the end, the range with the highest number of votes was selected. All the values in this bin were then averaged to get the best fit parameter value. An example of this binning is shown in the table below for the length parameter. Most of the clusters had a length between 1.5 and 2 meters. The 54 lengths within this range were averaged to get the best fit length of the plot. Using the best fit plot parameters, a grid was created to align with the plots in the point cloud map. This allowed for extracting the points within a plot. We currently manually fit the grid over the plot, but are working on automating this process. On the bottom left, we have the initial point cloud map. The top right shows the best fit plots. As stated previously, we used the raw data to improve the height estimation accuracy. One step of this was to use the grid to extract the raw data corresponding to each plot as shown in the bottom right. To help with the ground plane estimation, the bounding boxes were extended to cover some of the ground points belonging to the rows between crops. Every point within the extended bounding box was fed into the third stage of the algorithm. We did this for each of the extended bounding boxes to get a height estimation per plot. As stated previously, we used the grid to extract the raw points belonging to the plot. These were concatenated with the voxel filter data so that we still had the smoothened ground points but the raw plot data. Before estimating the height of points, we needed to determine points belonging to the ground plane. We did this for the points in each of the extended bounding boxes. This was done by using Point Cloud Library's plane model segmentation algorithm. It is based on a random sample consensus algorithm that works by randomly selecting 3 points, using them to estimate a planar model, applying this model to the entire dataset, and repeating this process until a best fit plane with the highest number of inlier points is found. The picture on the right shows the output of this algorithm, where all the red points are inlier points of the best fit plane, and the blue points are the outlier. Next, we use all of the inlier points to determine a best fit plane equation corresponding to the ground plane. This is done by using a linear least squares approximation approach to find the normal vector of the plane. Now we can find the height of all of the outlier points by finding their distance from the best fit plane. We have the centroid of the plane, which is the average of all the inliers, as well as the normal plane vector. These are used for the distance computation for every outlier point. For example, in the image on the right, all of the red points are passed into the linear least squares approximation algorithm to find a normal vector of the plane. Then all of the blue points are used to find the distance to the ground plane. This distance is the height estimation. Wheat was grown at Virginia Tech's Kentland farm in an ordered grid. We flew the UAV over each plot and recorded the LiDAR scans as well as the UAV's location. This has allowed us to create a comprehensive dataset of 96 wheat plots. We also recorded the ground truth plot height by manually measuring the heights of 3 plants per plot. Initially, we used only the voxel filter data to estimate the height. As expected, due to the averaging done with voxel filtering, these were all underestimations. To improve the estimations, we used the bounding box grid to extract the raw data belonging to the plots. When the height estimation was done with this, it was a lot noisier. We found that using the 99th percentile max height using the raw over voxel data gave the best results. Here we highlight the results of all three height estimation schemes. The top row is voxel only data height estimations. The middle row is the raw plot over voxel ground data height estimations. And the third row is the 99th percentile raw over voxel ground data height estimations. As described previously, it can be seen that the voxel only data constantly underestimates the height. The percent difference centers around the -15 to -10% bin and averages plus or minus 13.4%. Using the max height found in the raw data doesn't help due to the increase in noise. For example, there is a point all the way in the 100 to 105% bin. Its average percent difference in estimations was plus or minus 13.8%. Using the 99th percentile of max height helped increase accuracy. As shown in the third row, the data centers around the -5 to 0% bin and has an average percent difference of plus or minus 5.4%, with a root mean square error of 6.1 centimeters. Our second contribution was developing a simulation pipeline. The first step was to create a ground model. As input parameters, we set the farm size, the number of ground vertices, and the height variation. The ground vertices are used to create a Delaunay triangulation of the environment. The height for each of these ground vertices is set randomly within the input range set by the height variation. This lets us create a varying ground terrain as opposed to using just a flat ground model. Once we had the ground model, we could start populating with plots to create the virtual farm. We also had a few input parameters to help customize the process. The input parameters set the width and length of the plots, the width and length between plots, the number of plants within a plot, the minimum and maximum scaling factor used to set the heights of plants, and row data. The row data consists of the number of plots per row and the row offset, which allows shifting of the rows. We show one of the generated farms on the right. 5 different soybean models were used. For our farm, we had 3 rows of 10 plots. Each plot had a length of width of 3 and 2 meters, and had 90 soybean plots that were randomly placed within the plot. The plants themselves were assigned a random orientation and random scaling factor between the minimum and maximum input parameters. One of the 5 soybean models was randomly selected for placement each time a plant was placed. Here we show the map building of the virtual farm. The RGB scale of the LiDAR points correspond to their Z values. This also helps highlight the variation of the ground model. The same height estimation pipeline discussed previously is used for the simulation. The left image shows an overview of the virtual soybean farm. The right image shows the point cloud map after the first stage of the algorithm, once all the data filtering has been completed. We performed the height estimations on 3 different virtual farms. The main difference between the farms was the type of ground model. The first farm had a completely flat ground model. The height estimation algorithm for this farm had an RMSE of 4.8 centimeters. The second farm had a varying ground model with a height varying between plus and minus 0.5 meters. The height estimations for this second farm had an RMSE of 6.1 centimeters. Lastly, our third farm had a ground with a varying height between plus or minus 1 meter. The RMSE for height estimations on this virtual farm was 16 centimeters. As expected, the more varying the ground becomes, the more inaccurate the height estimations become. The standard deviation error also increases. To summarize, the height estimation had an average percent difference of plus or minus 5.4% with an RMSE of 6.1 centimeters for the real-world wheat experiment. We achieved accurate plot detection by finding the bounding box parameters. Simulation results show that the algorithm still holds up on a farm with a realistic ground model. With a flat ground model, the height estimation had an RMSE of 4.8 centimeters. The realistic ground model had an RMSE of 6.1 centimeters. However, as the ground variation increases to unrealistic proportions, the accuracy drops to an RMSE of 16.0 centimeters. While the results are promising for an initial study, there are still improvements that are needed. Currently, the algorithm is picky on the environment and terrain. Further testing is needed to make it more robust. For the plot detection, we need to fully automate the grid selection process. We also need to adjust the algorithm to work with non-rectangular plots. Thank you for listening to our presentation. The work discussed has been accepted to IROS 2020. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out at the provided email address.